بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. We start off by praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and sending our peace and blessings upon our Master Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us beneficial knowledge, a knowledge that brings us closer to Him, and a knowledge that changes the state of our hearts. Beneficial knowledge is the knowledge that changes the state of your heart. It increases you in taqwa, it increases you in God consciousness, it increases you in a closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we ask Allah to grant us ilm al-nafi', always beneficial knowledge. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make our hearts alive and not dead, and to grant us hearts that are not heedless, and hearts that have awe of Allah, hearts that love Allah and love the remembrance of Allah. The one that has Allah in his heart, he's victorious. The one that has Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in his heart, he has everything in the world. So we ask Allah for beneficial knowledge, a knowledge that we learn and we implement, a knowledge that brings us closer to Allah. With that being said, we continue our series on Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam. And I stated in the last class that we decided to talk about Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam because he's a monumental figure in Islam. He's a monumental figure in all of the Semitic religions. Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam is the father of all the prophets and messengers, as we stated in the last class. And now we are in something called the Hajj season. We're in something called the Hajj season, and the Hajj season is the season of the Hajj, where the Hajj pilgrimage takes place. We say Mawsum al-Hajj, the Hajj season, the season in which Hajj takes place. It's in a month called the Hijjah. It's in a month called the Hijjah, and the government or country of Saudi Arabia has announced today that they saw the Hilal of the Hijjah. So we tell you all the Hijjah Mubarak, inshaAllah. And Eid al-Adha is on the doorsteps. Eid al-Adha will be on Sunday, the 16th of June, which is Sunday, the 16th of June, which makes Saturday, the 15th of June, a Saturday. And what is the day before Eid al-Adha called? The day of Arafah, Yawm Arafah. So the day of Arafah will be on Saturday, and it's sunnah to fast on the day of Arafah. And then after that is Eid al-Adha on the 16th. And that's the 10th day of Dhul Hijjah. So Eid al-Adha is a blessed day and a beautiful day, inshallah. We all have a great day of Eid. And Eid al-Adha commemorates the memory of Ibrahim alayhi salam for when he sacrificed his son Ibrahim Ismail alayhi salam. So we decided to talk about Ibrahim in these 3 weeks. And next week, inshallah, we'll talk about the building of the Kaaba and the Hajj. And this week we want to talk about ZamZam and the blessings of ZamZam. This week we want to speak about ZamZam and the blessings of ZamZam and the rituals of the Hajj. The rituals of the Hajj are taken from Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam and the Sayyidah Hajar alayhi salam, the wife of Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam, the one that bore him Ismail. The one that bore him Ismail alayhi salam. So now when we go to Hajj, inshallah, Allah writes it upon us to make Hajj one day. Hajj is a beautiful ritual from the rituals of Islam. Hajj is a beautiful obligation from the obligations of Islam. We have obligations in Islam. We have Salah, and we have Siyam, Shahr Ramadan, we have fasting of Ramadan. We have the almsgiving, zakah, and we have something called Hajj al-Bayt. لِمَنْ اسْتَطَاعَ إِلَيْهِ السَّبِيلَ. We have something called the Hajj for whomsoever is able to make Hajj. We have something called Hajj for whomsoever is able to make Hajj. Allah, He says, وَلِلَّهِ عَلَى النَّاسِ حِجُّ الْبَيْتِ مَنْ اسْتَطَاعَ إِلَيْهِ السَّبِيلَ وَأَذِّنْ بِالنَّاسِ فِي الْحَجِّ يَأْتُوكَ رِجَالًا وَعَلَى كُلِّ ضَامِرٍ يَأْتِينَ مِنْ كُلِّ فَجٍّ حَمِيقٍ وأتموا الحج والعمرة لله الحج أشهر معلومات فمن فرض فيهن الحج فلا رفث ولا فسوق ولا جدال في الحج. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He mentions the obligation of Hajj multiple times in the Quran. He mentions it in Surah Al-Baqarah, and He mentions it in Surah Ali Imran, and He mentions it in a surah called Surah Al-Hajj. Allah, He says in Surah Ali Imran, وَلِلَّهِ عَلَى النَّاسِ حِجُّ الْبَيْتِ مَنْ اسْتَطَاعَ إِلَيْهِ سِبِيلًا. And upon Allah is the Hajj that He obligated for everyone, for whomsoever is able to make Hajj. What does it mean, whomsoever is able to make Hajj? What does that mean? We have something called a condition of obligation. We have something called a condition that makes something obligatory. We have something called a condition of an obligation, so it makes something obligatory upon you. For example, what makes salah obligatory upon you? What makes the prayer obligatory upon you? It's reaching the age of puberty and having a sane mind and being a Muslim. 3 things. Reaching the age of puberty, and puberty is known through its signs, not an age. Because in America, adulthood is 18. We say Islamically that doesn't make any sense. You're an adult when you reach the age of puberty, and puberty is known through its signs. The signs of puberty for the woman are the menstrual cycle or being pregnant, and for the man is al-ihtilam, wet dream. So when you hit the age of puberty, you're something called mukallaf. When you hit the age of puberty, you're something called mukallaf. When you hit the age of puberty, you're something called mukallaf. It's being legally obligated. It's called being legally obligated. Yani you don't pray a salah after the age of bulugh, you're held responsible, you're held accountable. Yani on the day of judgment, Yawm al-Qiyamah, Yawm al-Azifah, on Yawm al-Qiyamah you'll be asked about every prayer you did not pray since the age that you hit puberty. Whether it was 13 or 12 or 14, people differ on the age they hit puberty. So what makes salah an obligation in your conscience? Puberty, having a sane mind, and being a Muslim. Why do we say having a sane mind and being a Muslim? Because the one that is not sane, he's rufi' anhu al-qalam. The pen has been lifted upon him. The one that is not sane, the pen has been lifted upon him. And do we ask the Christians and the Jews and the Buddhists and Hindus to pray salah with us? No, you have to be a Muslim. Islam is the key. So now we have Hajj and Zakah and fasting, also obligations that also have conditions of obligation that make them obligatory upon you. Like for example, what makes Zakah an obligation upon you? What makes Zakah an obligation upon you? Having a certain amount of money. Because does the poor person that doesn't have a certain amount of money have to pay a Zakah? No. The poor person that has something called Iman in his heart, the poor individual that has something called Iman in his heart, he dies, he longs and yearns for the ability to pay Zakah, because Zakah is a beautiful obligation. It's mentioned in the Quran. But an obligation to give Zakah is having a certain amount of money with a lunar year passing over it. Now we have Hajj. Hajj is beautiful, it's amazing. It's why we're talking about Sayyidina Ibrahim. It's why we talk about Eid al-Adha. Hajj is a huge act of worship, by the way. But Hajj is interesting, it's different. It's different than Salah, it's different than Ramadan, and it's different than Zakah. And that's because it's the least reoccurring act of worship. It's the least reoccurring act of worship. We have something called reoccurring acts of worship. Salah is the most reoccurring, because Salah happens every day, 5 times a day. You pray Salah and you pray Salah and you pray Salah, you sleep and you go wake up, you pray Salah, you make wudu, you use the bathroom, pray Salah, 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 Salah. It's always Salah, Salah. You miss a Salah, you make up a Salah with the other Salah. It's Salah, Sunnah, Salah, Duha, Salah, Eid, Salah, everything is Salah all the time. Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillah. Islam is amazing, it's beautiful. It's the greatest inconvenience, we say. It's beautiful, it's amazing. Salah is amazing, it's great, it's nothing but goodness. It's amazing, it's nur, it's light. Salah is reoccurring, it's always happening. You could always pray Salah, and you're always obligated to pray Salah 5 times a day since the age of puberty. So everyone is familiar with Salah and the obligation of Salah and how to pray Salah. It's very rare. It's very rare that you find someone that does not know how to pray Salah. It's very rare, because even if he does not pray, he sees those who pray. Allahu Akbar, Fatiha, Surah, down, up, Tashahud, Salam, Salam. Then we have something called Ramadan. Ramadan is a fast that we do once a year. What is in the condition to make Ramadan mandatory upon you? Having a sane mind, reaching the age of puberty, and being a Muslim. But Ramadan has an extra thing, and that's not having a marad muzmin, not having a chronic illness. Because if you have a chronic illness, you don't have to fast. A chronic illness is an illness that you cannot get better from, like certain types of diabetes and old age. You're not able physically to fast. So that person doesn't have to fast. Lastly, Hajj. We're talking about Hajj now. This amazing act of worship that many people don't know how to make, that many people don't know how to perform, and that's because it's the least reoccurring act of worship. Ramadan comes once a year, right? So like you're pretty familiar with it. Zakah comes once a year. Zakah comes once a year for the person who's able to pay it. So not even everyone has to pay Zakah. So Zakah also has a lot of rulings that people don't know or are not aware of. Now we have something called Hajj in a place called Mecca, 6,000 miles away, in a country called Saudi Arabia, the kingdom of Saudi Arabia. That happens once in a lifetime. Yani the obligation of Hajj. The obligation of Hajj is once in a lifetime. Of course, you could make 7 Hajjs if you want, no problem. There's ajr in that. There's ajr in that. But I'm not a big fan of making more than one Hajj nowadays because the country of Saudi Arabia is not that beloved to my heart. You know, the Mecca and Medina, I love Mecca and Medina. I don't want to talk too political on the microphone. I love Mecca and Medina and anything Islamic, I love it, but I'm not crazy about the government of Saudi Arabia. So make one Hajj, don't give them your money. But Hajj is obligatory one single time in your life, and if you do it one time, the obligation has been cleared from your conscience, and that's what we're speaking about. And you have you want to go to Allah with a clean conscience. You want your conscience to be cleared. You want to go to Allah without debt. So if you attain something called Zad and Rahila, if you attain something called Zad and Rahila, Hajj becomes obligatory on you. Hajj becomes an obligation on you. What is Zad and what is Rahila? Zad is it's having enough money to go perform Hajj and to spend on yourself while you're at Hajj and to come back and also to provide for your family once you're gone. Because if I have 6 kids and a wife and I think I'm pious, so I go to Hajj and I leave them to starve and I come back they're dead, I'm not pious. This is a person that does not understand how religion works. Priorities, there's priorities. Priorities, wife, priority. Hajj is an obligation, but like you have to have enough money to take care of your family. So if you have something called Zad and Rahila, which is the means to go make Hajj and come back from Hajj and travel and be out on Hajj and to provide for your family once you're out, then Hajj becomes an obligation in your conscience, along with being healthy and able to perform the Hajj physically. The scholars, the fuqaha, they differed on the obligation of Hajj, on the obligation of the Hajj for the one who is unable to walk. What does that mean? He's handicapped, like he has a wheelchair or crutches. They differed on his status. So the fuqaha, they come and they say Hajj is obligatory upon every sane, capable Muslim, right? Now they say they differed on something. They differed on the fact of the one that's handicapped. Is it an obligation for him to make Hajj? Why am I saying this? Why am I mentioning this difference of opinion? I'm mentioning this difference of opinion for you to be aware and cognizant of the importance of Hajj. For you to be aware and cognizant of the extreme importance that Hajj is. Hajj is very important. Yani they're differing on the one who's handicapped. Some scholars said no, it's an obligation upon him. He should find someone to help him and take him. But the majority opinion, of course, the majority opinion is no, Hajj is not an obligation on the blind person or the person who's handicapped. But if he goes and makes Hajj with someone pushing him around or an aid, does his Hajj count? Of course his Hajj counts, no problem. I mean, of course, no doubt, his Hajj counts. But we're talking about it being obligation upon you. The Prophet ﷺ said the one who dies and he does not perform Hajj, and he had the means to perform Hajj, let him die a Jew or a Christian. Like let him pass away a Jew or a Christian is better for him. And the scholars say this doesn't mean you pass away a Jew or a Christian, but it's extreme, like it's an extreme warning. It's an extreme warning, man. Hajj is important. It's very important. Be serious about it. Then the scholars, they also differ on something else. They also differ on the one who attains or he acquires Zad and Rahila. The one who acquires the Zad and Rahila. Does he have to make Hajj immediately? Some scholars say yes, he has to make it immediately, and every second that goes by with him not making Hajj, he's atham. And the other opinion is, no, it's okay, he has all the time that he wants as long as he passes away and he makes Hajj. But Hajj is very important. We should have priorities in our life before we go to Disney and before we go to the Bahamas and before we go to Fiji and wherever people go now. Pakuta or Pakinta or Thailand, that place called in Thailand. Yeah, you should worry about making Hajj. And if you want to do something, and if you set a strong resolve for something in your heart, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He facilitates it for you. This is something true 100%. If you have a strong resolve in your heart intends to do something truly from the bottom of your heart, Allah, He facilitates that for you. He opens up for you to do it. So we should all have an intention to make Hajj, even if we don't have the means. We should have a strong intention to want to make Hajj. We should have a strong intention to want to make Hajj. Now going back to why I mentioned Hajj and the importance of Hajj and etc. is because we're talking about Sayyidina Ibrahim, and he's the father of Hajj, and he's the Rams, he's the sign of Hajj. You know, when we think of Hajj, we think of our forefather Ibrahim. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he said, "Khudu anni manasikakum." He said, learn from me your manasik. Manasik is the jama' of mansak. We have something called the mansak in Arabic. The plural is manasik. They are rituals of Hajj. One mansak is tawaf, for example, going around the Kaaba. This is called tawaf. We make tawaf 7 times. This is a mansak of Hajj. Another mansak of Hajj is sa'i bayna Safa wal Marwa. Another mansak of Hajj is to perform the sa'i between Safa and Marwa 7 times. This is another mansak of Hajj. Another mansak of Hajj is ramil jamarat, is to throw the idols, those idols, to throw stones at them. So all 3 of them together are called manasik. To sleep in Mina, to go to Muzdalifah, all these different things are manasik al-Hajj that we learn from who? Ibrahim alayhi salam and his wife Hajar alayhi salam and his son Ismail alayhi salam. Then the Prophet came later, many years down the line, thousands of years later, and he said, learn from me your rituals of Hajj. خُذُوا عَنِّي مَنَاسِكَكُمْ. So we follow the Prophet and we learn from him, and he was taught by Allah the way that Ibrahim alayhi salam performed Hajj. Interesting, wallahi. The building of the Kaaba is interesting. We're going to talk about that next week, but today we want to talk about the story of ZamZam. Today we want to discuss the story of ZamZam. ZamZam is something called, there's something in the world called ZamZam. It's a well of water found in Mecca. It's a miraculous, blessed well. It's a miraculous and blessed well. We want to learn the story of how ZamZam was found. Mecca is a barren desert. Before I begin all of that, last week we spoke about Ibrahim alayhi salam and his upbringing. And we said Ibrahim alayhi salam was brought up in a place called Babel, Mesopotamia. And Babel is mentioned in the Quran in Surah Al-Baqarah. ببابل هاروت وماروت وما يعلمان السحر إلا. I don't remember the ayah exactly, but Allah, He mentions Babel in Surah Al-Baqarah in a large ayah speaking about black magic. That these two angels, Harut and Marut, they brought black magic down to this place called Babel. We said Babel was Iraq. We said Iraq was Mesopotamia. That's where Ibrahim alayhi salam was from. And today we talk about him marrying Hajar and going with them to a valley called Becca. He took Hajar and his son Ismail. So Ibrahim alayhi salam, he made dua to Allah for a child. And he did not have a child with his wife Sarah. His first wife that he met and he married in Iraq or Babel was Sarah. He got married to her and he did not bear a child with her. And then, as we mentioned in the last class, as we mentioned in the last class, he was on the fitrah. إن إبراهيم كان أمة قانتا لله حنيفا ولم يكن من المشركين شاكرا لأنعمه اجتباه وهداه إلى صراط مستقيم وآتيناه في الدنيا حسنة وإنه في الآخرة لمن الصالحين. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He describes and He characterizes Ibrahim in the Quran as a Hanif. And we said that's someone that is on strong tawheed, strong belief in Allah. And we said that Allah granted him this strong status, characterizing him as an ummah. Allah called him an ummah. Allah referred to Ibrahim alayhi salam as an ummah on his own. And we said Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He referred to Ibrahim alayhi salam as an ummah on his own because he believed in Allah when no one else believed in Allah, and he was strong on his faith. And there was a day of Eid, there was a large festival. There was a large festival in his place where he was from, and his father was one of the idol crafters, so his father and his friends called him out to come to attend this festival. And he didn't want to go out to this festival. He denied going out because he had a plan, and his plan was to destroy the idols. So his father and his friends called out to Ibrahim. They said, come with us. And he said, Inni saqim. He goes, no, I don't feel well. He stayed back, and he ended up destroying the idols and breaking the idols because he was upset that they worshiped these idols instead of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It hurt him a lot. So they came back from their festival and they found the axe or the hatchet in the hand of the largest idol. And they said, who did this to our idols? Who did this to our idols? And he said, go ask the large one and go speak to them only if they spoke. So they got upset and their arrogance overtook them, we said. We said that they did not accept defeat because logically he proved them logically wrong. He goes, you have no brains that work because you're worshiping things that you create, and they couldn't even defend themselves, and you put for them food and food every single day and they go bad. So he said, use your logic. And we said, ثُمَّ نُكِسُوا عَلَى رُؤُوسِهِمْ. They realized that they were wrong, but then the arrogance overtook them, because when you're wrong and you're arrogant, you just say, come outside so I can knock you out. You ever gotten an argument with someone and you prove him wrong and he said, you're stupid? What does that have to do with anything, brother? Prove me wrong. You're dumb. You're from this school. What? What? Come outside. What? That's what happened to Ibrahim alayhi salam exactly. That's what happened to Musa alayhi salam exactly. Once they are proven wrong through logic or through miracles, they can't respond, so they say, okay, let's kill him, or let's So Musa was the Pharaoh tried to kill Musa, and in the story of Ibrahim, they said, throw him in a fire. Wansuru alihatakum. They said, throw him in a fire, make a large fire, and give aid and victory to your idols. How dare he disrespect our gods and our fathers' gods and our grandfathers' gods, right? So they made a large fire. We said last class, a large fire that was the largest fire in the history of the time. And they threw him in the fire, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala called out to the fire, قُلْنَا يَا نَارُ كوني بردا وسلاما على إبراهيم وأرادوا به كيدا فجعلناهم الأخسرين ونجيناه ولوطا إلى الأرض التي باركنا فيها للعالمين. Allah, He says that, so we called out to the fire. Allah says we called out, Allah speaking about Himself, and we told the fire to be cool and gentle on Ibrahim. وقلنا يا نار كوني بردا وسلاما على إبراهيم. And the scholars, they said that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala called out, if He called out to the fire and all He said was كوني بردا, and all He said was be cool on Ibrahim, it would have been so cold and he would have froze to death. But Allah, He said no, be cold and gentle on our slave Ibrahim. And then He said وَأَرَادُوا بِهِ كَيْدًا فَجَعَلْنَاهُمُ الْأَخْسَرِينَ. They wanted bad for him and they plotted bad for him, but we made them the real losers. Allah, He said that they wanted and they planned for Ibrahim badness, but we made them the real losers. And we said they are the real losers because they don't have Allah. The one that has Allah is a winner. Allah granted him victory. He miraculously granted him victory through a fire. And then Allah says, وَأَنْجَيْنَاهُ وَلُوطًا إِلَى الْأَرْضِ الَّذِي بَارَكْنَا فِيهَا لِلْعَالَمِينَ. The next ayah, Allah, He says, and we saved him and his cousin Lut. We saved Ibrahim and his cousin Lut to that land that we blessed it, which is Palestine. So now Ibrahim, he goes from Babel, Mesopotamia, with his wife Sarah, and he takes it to Palestine. He takes it to Palestine. And Lut alayhi salam as well, he leaves his land and Allah sends molten rocks to destroy his people. And his wife goes back with his people, so Lut's wife doesn't believe in him. But Sarah, she believes in Ibrahim, and they are in Palestine now. Right now they're in Palestine. So now, next part of the story, Ibrahim leaves Babel and he goes to Palestine with Sarah. She has not bore him a child yet, and he wants a child. So throughout this time in his life, he's making dua to Allah. Of course, he's close to Allah and he loves Allah. And in the Quran, he says, Rabbi habli min as-salihin. In Surah As-Safat, there's a dua that Ibrahim makes. He says, oh Allah, grant me a pious offspring. So Sarah is not able to give him a child. He ends up marrying a second wife called Hajar. When he marries Hajar, she blesses him with a child called Ismail. So his first child was who? Ismail. He has another child called Ishaq. That's the son of who? Sarah, yeah. So Ibrahim alayhi salam, first wife was in Iraq. Her name was Sarah. He moved with her to Palestine. She did not bear a child yet. He married the second wife called Hajar. He had a son with Hajar. Ismail, the son of Ibrahim, and the son of Hajar. And then 13 years later, his first wife, her name is what? Sarah, gave him Ishaq. وَجَعَلْنَا فِي ذُرِّيَّتِهِ النَّبُوَّةَ وَالْكِتَابِ. We said in last class that Allah granted Ibrahim and his offspring two things. Dhurriya, which is an offspring, and Nabuwah, which is prophethood, and Al-Kitab, which is books that were sent down by God, correct? So we said that the offspring of Ibrahim is two, right? It's the son of Sarah, Ishaq, Yaqub, Yusuf, etc. All the prophets are here. And then Ismail, son of Hajar, down, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam comes from that progeny. You see that? So Ibrahim alayhi salam is known as the father of the prophets because of this, because his progeny, his offspring are all prophets. The prophets of Bani Israel and the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam were all from Ibrahim alayhi salam. So now he's in Palestine, phase 2, right? Phase 2 of his life, Palestine. So now he has a son called Ismail with his wife Hajar, and Allah sends him a commandment to go travel to this barren land called Becca. So Allah now sends down a command to Ibrahim alayhi salam to travel to Becca. So he goes to Becca, which is current day Mecca. وَلِلَّهِ عَلَى النَّاسِ حِجُّ الْبَيْتِ مَنْ اسْتَطَاعَ إِلَيْهِ سَبِيلًا إِنَّ أَوَّلَ بَيْتٍ وُضِعَ لِلنَّاسِ لَلَّذِي بِبَكَّةَ مُبَارَكًا لِلْعَالَمِينَ فِيهِ آيَاتٌ بَيِّنَاتٌ مَقَامُ إِبْرَاهِيمَ وَمَنْ دَخَلَهُ كَانَ آمِنًا. The ayahs go like this. إِنَّ أَوَّلَ بَيْتٍ وُضِعَ لِلنَّاسِ لَلَّذِي بِبَكَّةَ مُبَارَكًا وَهُدًى لِلْعَالَمِينَ. Indeed, the first house of worship ever established by Allah was that house in Becca. And then Allah describes it. لَلَّذِي بِبَكَّةَ. That house in Becca, مُبَارَكًا وَهُدًى لِلْعَالَمِينَ. It's a blessed house. It's a blessed house. And it's guidance to mankind. وَهُدًى لِلْعَالَمِينَ فِيهِ آيَاتٌ بَيِّنَاتٌ مَقَامُ إِبْرَاهِيمَ. In that house, Becca, Mecca, right? In that house, the Kaaba, you'll find something called ayatun bayinatun, clear signs, beautiful things like ZamZam and the maqam of Ibrahim and the Kaaba itself. And you'll find Safa and Marwa. You'll find beautiful things in that house, right? وَمَنْ دَخَلَهُ كَانَ آمِنًا. And whomsoever enters that house, Allah gives a promise. He says, whomsoever enters that house, he will be safeguarded. They say that the Haram The haram is called the haram. The haram in Mecca is called the haram of Mecca. It's that place that is safeguarded and protected by Allah. So Allah gives a promise, whomsoever enters Mecca, he is promised and guaranteed safety. The scholars, they went and they differed on the criminal or the murderer. If he's running away from the cops or if he's running away from the government and he goes into the haram, what do we do to him? Can we kill him or not? This is just an example to show you that the haram of Mecca is protected. They say don't kill a fly in Mecca. Like, you know, you have a fly, they say don't kill it, it's the haram. You ever heard that? Don't kill it, it's the haram. Because whomsoever enters the haram is protected, even the fly. And then Allah goes and talks about Hajj after these 3 ayahs, talking about the Kaaba. So I'm talking about Becca, the valley of Becca. It's called the valley. Why is Becca or Mecca? I'm going to call it Mecca from now on. It was Becca originally, it became Mecca. And this is common in the Arabic language, it's called iqlab. This is common in the Arabic language. Many times in the Arabic language, the ba comes from a meme and the meme comes from a ba because they're similar. And their makhraj, the way they come out is from a similar area. And sometimes it's easier to say ma than ba. So it became Mecca over time. But it was originally Becca. There's a store in East Orange off of Main Street called Becca, Islamic Clothing. It's really good. I love the name. Wallahi, it's really good. They have kufis and they have every single kind of thobe and hijab and abaya. Yeah. I think they have a website now. It took them a long time to get online, but it's really good. It's on exit 167, I think, or 147 off the Parkway. I just think about it because every time I say Becca, I think of the clothing shop. They have really nice bags as well. Their bags are really good quality. That says Becca on it. Anyway, we call Mecca a valley. What is a valley linguistically? A valley is something that comes in between mountains. It's flatness between mountains. So if you ever go to Mecca, may Allah grant us the ability to go to Mecca and visit the Kaaba and make dua at the Kaaba and pray in the Kaaba, you will see mountains everywhere. You'll see mountains everywhere. Jabal, I forgot the names of the mountains. There's mountains that surround the Kaaba, and if you have a hotel that's really far, you got to walk up the mountain and down the mountain. It's really hot. It's like 115 degrees every day. You go from the AC of the hotel to the hot Mecca to the AC of the Haram, and it's very weather changes a lot and it gets you sick. But yeah, it's beautiful. Mecca is a valley. So Allah commands Ibrahim to go to this valley, and he goes with his wife Hajar and his son Ismail. Then this story takes place, the story of ZamZam. Now we're here. And we said in the first class that we want to go and we want to talk about the story of Ibrahim from the Quran. And we said that the Quranic story, we talked about that in the first class, is sporadic and random and it's all over the place. So Ibrahim's story is mentioned throughout the Quran in multiple areas. In different parts of his story are mentioned in multiple areas. We said the first mention of him is in a surah called Surah Al-Baqarah. It's the second chapter of the Quran. That's where Allah mentions the building of the Kaaba. And that's the first mention of Ibrahim alayhi salam. That's next week's class. We're going to talk about the building of the Kaaba. Last week we spoke about the destruction of the idols, which comes in multiple places. The story is mentioned in multiple surahs of the Quran. And we said the longest narration of the destruction of the idols was found in Surah Al-Anbiya that we mentioned last week. It's also mentioned in Safat and Shu'ara. Then we have ZamZam and the miraculous well of ZamZam, which is mentioned in the surah that we're going to tackle today, called Surah what? Anyone take a guess? I thought you got it. What is it? It's Surah Ibrahim. Surah Ibrahim is named Surah Ibrahim for these verses that we're going to talk about today in regards to ZamZam. So of course Allah does not mention the word ZamZam in the Quran. ZamZam is not mentioned. The word ZamZam is not mentioned, but the story of ZamZam is alluded to. It's alluded to in the Quran. As many things happens, like it's the nature of the Quran. Many times the Quran doesn't mention something specifically exactly by lafz, by exact word. But Allah, He alludes to it. He refers to it. So there's reference to ZamZam in the Quran through this dua of Ibrahim alayhi salam. So we said last week we spoke from Surah Al-Anbiya. Now we're going to go and we're going to drive the car to Surah Ibrahim. Surah Ibrahim comes before Surah Al-Anbiya chronologically in the Quran. I mean, in order, like it comes before it. Anbiya comes about 5 surahs after Ibrahim. So what happened? Ibrahim, he left. Allah says we saved him and we sent him to Palestine with his cousin Lut, and they were there for a couple of years. Then he married this lady called Hajar. He had Ismail. 13 years later, he had a child called Ishaq with Sarah, but that's not yet. So now he has Ismail only. Then Allah commands Ibrahim to go to Mecca. What does Ibrahim do? He listens to the command of God. He goes to Mecca now. He doesn't know why. He gets to Mecca, and it's a barren desert. I don't know if you guys ever been to Mecca, but wallahi, it's so barren. Right now it's not, of course, because there's ZamZam and there's hotels and there's Hilton and all that. But before, like if you go like 5 to 10 minutes out of the Haram, it's nothing but barren desert. It's not even barren desert like how you think of desert, like sand dunes and fun. It's like really hard and like coarse. It's really hard and coarse, and it's so hot. It's so hot and dry. So that's how it was when he went with his wife and his son. He gets to Mecca, and after a short while of being there, they have their provisions because they're traveling. Of course, they have some dates and some water. He's commanded by God to leave his wife Hajar and Ismail there. He's commanded by Allah to leave his wife and his child Ismail there in Mecca and to go back to Palestine. So he upholds the command of God, and he starts to make his way back to Palestine. And as he's walking away from his wife Hajar, she calls out to him, and he ignores her because he doesn't want to hurt her. So he's not trying to tell her I'm leaving, so he just left. And she calls out to him again a second time, and he ignores her. And then she calls out to him a third time, and she says, Allahu amaraka bihada? فأجابها وقال نعم. She calls out to him, and he kind of turns around the third time, and she goes, did Allah command you with this? Like, did Allah command you to leave us? And he said, yes. He said, na'am. And she said, إِذَنْ لَا يُدَيِّعُنَ Allah. She goes, indeed, khalas, that's it. If Allah commanded this, then that's it. Allah will not forsake us. That's it, I'm good. This is something called tawakkul ala Allah. This is something called having strong reliance upon Allah and having something called iman in your heart. Because if Allah commands you to do something, you know it's not in vain. Please listen to this concept, wallahi, this is really important. Like if Allah commands you to do something, the mu'min, the one that has Allah in his heart, he knows it's not in vain. Allah, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَأْمُرُ بِالْفَحْشَاءِ أَتَقُولُونَ عَلَى اللَّهِ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Allah does not command in vain. Allah doesn't command with badness. Do you say upon Allah what you can't say? Yani Allah doesn't command something unless it's good. And she understands that because she has strong iman. She goes, Allahu amaraka bihada. She goes, did Allah command you to leave me? And he said, yes. Like, yeah. She goes, إِذَنْ لَا يُدَيِّعَنَ اللَّهِ. Khalas, Allah will not forsake us. And they say, in the tafsir of the ayahs that I'm going to read, they say, because we start off the ayahs by one of the ayahs, رَبَّنَا إِنِّي أَسْكَنْتُ min dhurriyyati biwadin. He goes and he calls out to Allah, he makes dua to Allah. I'm not going to read this now because I'm going to read it in order with the ayahs. But they say he recited these ayahs as he was walking away because he was scared for his family, so he made dua to Allah. So now what happens? The story goes like this. Now what happens? Ibrahim alayhi salam, he leaves his wife and his son Ismail. He leaves his wife, Hajar, and his son Ismail without provisions to last them long. He walks back to Palestine, and she and her son Ismail continuously eat from the dates in the small water that they had. It's said that she had like a water pouch that shortly ran out, that quickly ran out. And now her son is crying, and he is the radi'a. He's young, and he's a baby. And he's hungry, and he's thirsty. So he starts to cry and make a fuss. And her, as a caring mother, she's worried about her son. And she sees water from a distance. They're on a place called Marwa. Marwa is right next to the Kaaba, so it's all considered the Haram. It's all one thing. So they are standing on this place called Marwa, and she sees water, or she goes to look for water. They say either she saw a mirage, which is like she thought she saw water because of how thirsty she was, or she was running to find water or to find a tribe that was passing by. So the next hilltop or the next mountaintop was Safa. So they're on Marwa, and she runs to Safa. So she goes down from Marwa, and then it's a mountain, right? So you go down the mountain, and then it's flat, and then it's mountain again, right? So they say she ran from the part that was flat, and then she gets to a Safa, and she stands on a Safa, and she sees nothing. And she looks back at Marwa, and she sees something. So she goes and she runs back to Marwa. She gets to Marwa, and she stands, and she looks around, and she sees nothing. And she goes back and forth frantically in search of water or something. They say she was frantically looking for a tribe or a caravan, perhaps. Excuse me. She was looking for a tribe or a caravan. Perhaps she may find something for her son. Perhaps she may find water or food for her and her son. She does this how many times? In search of water. 7 times, right? 7 times. This is called sa'i. This is called the sa'i bin Safa wal Marwa. We have something called tawaf around the Kaaba, and we have something called the sa'i. And we said that these are manasik of the manasik of Hajj. These are rituals of the rituals of Hajj. We learned them from Ibrahim and his wife and his family, correct? And we all do this in remembrance of her and her strong reliance upon Allah. After 7 times of back and forth, she finds no water, and no food. And at the end of the 7th time, she hears a voice from a distance. And she can't make out what it's saying. So she hears it again and she can't make out what it's saying. And she calls out, "Who are you? What is this?" And then there's water that starts to spring from the feet of Ismail alayhi salam. And they say that that was Jibreel alayhi salam. He came down, the archangel Gabriel came down, and he hit with his heels the floor that was, or the ground that was right by Ismail alayhi salam. Because there's stories like growing up, I used to always hear the story, oh, Ismail, he hit his feet and the water sprout. So it's not completely inaccurate. It's not that story is not completely inaccurate, because he was hitting his feet, crying. You know, babies when they cry, they hit their feet like that. So he was hitting the floor, but they say Jibreel alayhi salam came down to that area exactly, and he hit his heels, and it caused the water to sprout from there exactly. So it sprout from the feet of Ismail alayhi salam, basically, correct? And the other narration or the other opinion is that his wings, he flapped his wings hard on the ground. He slapped the ground with his wings. Whatever, wings, feet, heels, whatever it is. The water sprout at the feet of Ismail alayhi salam. And Hajar was overwhelmed with joy. She's happy they're not going to die in the desert now. She runs to the water. She immediately runs to the water. She drinks a bit. She gives a bit to her son, and she begins to form rocks to protect the water so it does not go everywhere. And she says, "Zami, Zami." She starts to say, "Zami, Zami." And they say that this is fil lughat al-Suryaniyya. They say that this is in the Semitic language that they spoke, and it means to stay put, or something like that. فَسُمِّيَتْ زَمْزَمْ بِزَمْزَمْ. So ZamZam was then named ZamZam because she said Zami, Zami, when she went to collect and stop the water from gushing everywhere so she could save the water. Brothers and sisters, this is a miracle from the miracles of Allah. This woman, she had something called faith in Allah. She trusted that Allah will not forsake her. Her husband left her, and she asked her husband, who was a messenger of God, that she believed him to be a messenger of God and close to God, "Why are you leaving us? Did God tell you to leave us?" And he responded, "Yes." She said, "Khalas, no problem. I believe in God." And God came with victory to her and her son. She gathers the water and she says, "Zami, Zami," and she places rocks around it. That's what you do to a well. So you contain the water, and the water continues to gush until today. Until today, by the way, we have ZamZam. The whole world drinks from ZamZam until today. The ZamZam water is a miracle. It's a miraculous miracle. It's a miraculous miracle, as we just heard, and it has outstanding benefits, and it's miraculous in its nature. And there's so many ahadith in regards to ZamZam. So now she goes and she stops the gushing. She puts the thing and she says Zami, and she drinks her full, and Ismail drinks his full. And the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he refers to this incident in a hadith, and he says, "Yarhamullahu Ismail, law tarakat zamzama, أو قال لو لم تغرف من الماء لكانت زمزم عينا معينا." The Prophet ﷺ, he says the whole story of ZamZam and Hajar in a hadith in Bukhari, and he says in this hadith, he goes, "Yarhamullahu Ismail." He goes, "May Allah have mercy on the mother of Ismail. May Allah have mercy on the mom of Ismail." His mom. Who's his mom? Hajar. Why? He goes, لو تركت زمزم أو قال لو لم تغرف من الماء. He goes, if she left ZamZam how it was sprouting and she didn't stop it and say Zami, or if she did not take from the water, لكانت زمزم عينا معينا, that ZamZam would have overflew and filled all of Mecca up, and perhaps maybe would not have been saved. But he said, may Allah have mercy on her. Basically, she saved ZamZam, and she protected ZamZam from going to waste and getting lost. So now, why is ZamZam called ZamZam? Because of this that happened. They say that Zami, in the language, the Syrianic language, it means stay put or something like that. But there's another opinion that Ibn Hajar mentions, and he says that ZamZam means a lot, a big number, kathir. And they say that's because it's extremely mubarak, it's extremely blessed. The blessings in it are a lot, and it's a lot of water. So it's a lot of water, and it's extremely blessed water. What do I mean that ZamZam is extremely blessed? What do I mean by ZamZam is extremely blessed? What I mean by ZamZam is extremely blessed is that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he tells us that it's extremely blessed in many ahadith talking about it. For example, the Prophet, he says Mecca is a blessed land, for example. Or Allah tells us Mecca is a blessed land, so we say Mecca is blessed. And there's reasons behind these blessings. What is the reason behind the blessings of ZamZam? Like what is one reason that ZamZam is blessed, in my opinion? It's the answer to a dua of Ibrahim when he was walking away. He says, رَبَّنَا إِنِّي أَسْكَنْتُ بِذُرِّيَّتِي بِوَادٍ. He goes, oh Allah, I left my progeny and my wife, so grant them good. And Allah, he answers the dua of Ibrahim with this well. And it's the result of Hajar running back and forth, frantically looking for water for her son. And it's the result of Jibreel alayhi salam coming down and flapping his wings or hitting his heels at the feet of Ismail alayhi salam, another prophet and messenger. It's a blessed water in a blessed valley. It's a blessed water in a blessed valley. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, speaking about ZamZam, he goes, خير ماء على وجه الأرض ماء زمزم فيه طعام من الطعم وشفاء من السقم وشر ماء على وجه الأرض ماء بوادي برحوت بقبة بحضرموت كرجل الجراد من الهوام تصبح تتدفق وتمسي لا بلال لها. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says in a hadith that gives us an idea of why ZamZam is blessed and how ZamZam is blessed. He goes, خير ماء على وجه الأرض ماء زمزم. He goes, the greatest water on the face of the earth is the water of ZamZam. خير ماء على وجه الأرض. The greatest water on the face of the planet Earth is ZamZam. He goes, فيه طعام من الطعم. Then he explains why it's blessed. He goes, it has food for hunger. وشفاء من السقم. And it has a cure from an illness and a cure to illness. What does this mean? They say that this means that when you drink ZamZam and you're hungry, you're no longer hungry. This is from the miraculous characteristics of ZamZam. And if you drink ZamZam and you feel a bit sick and you drink with the intention of being cured, Allah cures you. It's miraculous. I'll tell you all the current day example. We say a modern example of ZamZam being miraculous. The first time I went to Umrah, like 10 years ago, 12 years ago, I went with a group of people from ICPC. It was the second ever Umrah group from ICPC. So they had this new thing that they were trying out called Umrah from the masjid. They had 1 year, it was very successful. The next year I was on the next one, right? So I went there and there was a brother with me on that trip. Wallahi, I'll never forget this. We were there for like 13 days or like 12 days, 12, 13 days, like 5 days, 6 days here, 6 days here, right? And this guy was always in the haram praying salah. He was a very religious brother. May Allah bless him. He's still religious. Alhamdulillah, he didn't fall off. May Allah keep him steadfast, you know? Sometimes people, they're religious. They go to Umrah, they come back, they go. May Allah keep him steadfast. He was a good guy. He used to fill up his jug of ZamZam, and all he drank, wallahi, for 13 days, the entire time we were there with ZamZam, he did not eat a meal. He did not eat food. He just drank ZamZam. He just drank ZamZam. Why? Because he has strong belief, and he's a mu'min, and he loves Allah, and he kept mentioning this hadith. So I'll never forget this hadith because of him. I'll never forget this hadith because of him. He's like, I'm full. I drink it and I'm full. So if you're hungry and you drink ZamZam, it suffices you from a meal. So instead of taking meal replacements, you could go and drink ZamZam water and lose a lot of weight. All jokes aside, it's miraculous. And from its miraculous characteristics is that it fills you up if you're hungry. It fills you up if you're hungry. And being in the haram, for any of you that went to the haram, you'll understand the difficulty of going out to eat a meal and coming back. Sometimes it's really difficult, and sometimes you're there the whole day for ibadah. Sometimes you go out dhuhr and you leave at Isha. So you're hungry the whole day and you go drink ZamZam and you're not hungry anymore. So it's miraculous. The Prophet, he says, فِيهِ طَعَامٌ مِنَ الطُّعْمِ. It has food that will nourish you from hunger. وَشِفَاءٌ مِنَ السُّقْمِ. And it has a curing ability from illness. And this is known about ZamZam. ZamZam cures sick. You always hear your grandma say, oh, take ZamZam and rub it on your eye. Or take ZamZam and drink it and say Bismillah and make this dua. So if you're sick and you have iman in your heart and you make dua to Allah to cure you from your sickness, Allah, He'll cure you through ZamZam. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, مَاءُ زَمْزَمَ لِمَا شُرِبَ لَهُ. He says that the water of ZamZam is what it was drunk for. The Prophet Muhammad, he says the water of ZamZam is what it was drunk for. What you drink ZamZam for is what you get. They say the meaning of this is that when you intend something, when you drink ZamZam, as long as it's a good intention, you'll get it. So if you drink ZamZam with the intention of being full from it, you'll be full from it. And they also say the meaning of the hadith is you don't have to verbalize what you want from it, but you could verbalize. You could say, oh, I want this, then you drink it. But they say when the ZamZam is what it's drunken for or what it's drunk for, means you don't have to verbalize it. Allah knows what you want in your heart. As long as it's a pious, good intention, Allah, He'll grant you it. And they go on to say that it could be general for anything you want, even in the dunya. Even in the dunya, not only specifically just being full, because that's specific in the hadith, being full or being cured, but it could be for a pious spouse or a job, whatever it is. Basically, what this means is that the dua that you have or the intention that you have when you drink ZamZam is answered. It's mustajab. It's mustajab. And sometimes you don't get it like this. And sometimes the dua doesn't come like a thunderbolt. You get it like this, like, I want a car. It doesn't work. I made dua. Brother, wait 40 years, brother. Ayyub alayhi salam, he waited 40 years before he complained to Allah. He waited 40 years. 40 years of patience, 40 years. Then he said, Ya Allah, I'm hurt. And then the victory came like that. So be patient and make a lot of dua. Sometimes your dua is not answered for a good reason for you to keep asking Allah. So be patient, be patient and make dua. Have a connection with Allah. ZamZam is what it's drunk for. There's a story in regards to this hadith. There's a story in regards to this hadith. There's someone called Abdullah ibn Mubarak. Abdullah ibn Mubarak is something called a tabi'i. Abdullah ibn Mubarak is something what we call a tabi'i. A tabi'i is something called a follower. We have something called a sahabi. We have a nabi, and we have a sahabi, and we have a tabi'i, and we have a tabi'i. We have categories of people. We have a Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He has something called sahaba. Sahabat al-Rasul. Those who accompanied the Prophet, they're called sahaba. So who are those who accompanied the sahaba? They're called tabi'un. Those who followed, because they followed the sahaba in goodness. Because the sahaba are good, because they followed the Prophet. And the tabi'i, or the one who's a follower, he follows the sahabi. And the one that comes after them is a tabi'i, or a tabi'i. The one who follows a tabi'i. So those are three qurun mufaddala. We have three generations that are referred to as al-qurun al-mufaddala. We have three generations that are referred to as the virtuous generations. Preferred. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much. The preferred generations. Because the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says in the hadith, خير القرون قرني ثم الذي يلونهم ثم الذي يلونهم. The Prophet, he says in a famous hadith that the greatest of all generations is my generation, the Sahaba, and those who follow them, and those who follow them. So these are called the Qurun al-Mufaddala, the preferred generations, those that are virtuous. So Abdullah bin Mubarak, what is he for? He's a tabi'i. So he saw the Sahaba, but he didn't see the Prophet. So he's not a Sahabi, but he's a very pious man. He was a student of someone called An-Nu'man ibn Thabit ibn Zubta ibn Marzaban. He was a student of Abu Hanifa An-Nu'man. Abu Hanifa, the first of the four fuqaha that has a madhab called the Hanafi madhab, his actual name is An-Nu'man, the son of Thabit, the son of Zuta, the son of Marzaban. He was originally from a place called Kabul, because his great-grandfather was from Kabul in Afghanistan, which is Khurasan at the time. But Abu Hanifa himself was born and raised in Kufa, and his father was born and raised in Kufa. And Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib was the Amir al-Mu'mineen, and his Khalifa was in Kufa, and he saw Abu Hanifa's father, and he made dua for his offspring in him. So Ali ibn Abi Talib, he touched the head of Thabit, the father of Nu'man, who's Abu Hanifa. And he touched his head and he made dua for him and his offspring. And Abu Hanifa came out from his offspring. He had a student from his students. He had many students. Abu Hanifa is famous for his students because he raised a great amount of amazing students that produced a lot. One of them was Abdullah ibn Mubarak. He was also a muhaddith. Abdullah ibn Mubarak was known for hadith, but he was a Hanafi because he followed Abu Hanifa. He was in the circle of Imam Abu Hanifa in the Masjid of Kufa. There's a story of him in regards to this hadith. Someone narrates that he sees Abdullah ibn Mubarak in Mecca one time. رأيت عبد الله ibn المبارك بمكة أتى زمزم. He goes, I saw Abdullah ibn Mubarak in Mecca, and he goes to the well of ZamZam. فاستقى شربة. So he went out and he got like a cup from ZamZam. ثم استقبل القبلة. And he said, ماء زمزم لما شرب له. So then he went and he faced the Qibla. Like that's what you do. You take ZamZam and you go face the Kaaba, right? Because the Kaaba is beautiful and you want to make dua to the Kaaba. And then he said, he goes, وإني أشربه لعطش القيامة ثم شربه. He goes, I'm drinking this ZamZam, because we said ZamZam is what it's drunk for, right? So you could intend something in your heart, that's a dua, or you can make a dua verbally. He goes, I'm drinking this for the thirst of the Day of Judgment. Because on the Day of Judgment, you're going to be thirsty, except for those who are blessed with the opportunity to drink from the well of the Prophet ﷺ, the Hawd of the Prophet ﷺ. That's why we always ask Allah to grant us the opportunity to drink from the well of the Prophet, the Hawd of the Prophet ﷺ. So he made dua as he faced the Kaaba for Allah to grant him to remove his thirst on that day of Yawm al-Qiyamah. So we were talking about the hadith of the greatest water is the water of ZamZam. We said it has in it something that will suffice you of hunger, and it will cure you of your sickness. But we also talked about it being for whatever it's drunken for, as long as it's a good thing, right? Meaning that it's your dua or your needs or your wants or your intentions are answered through ZamZam because it's a blessed water, because it's miraculous. Then the Prophet went on in the hadith and he continued talking. He goes, وَشَرُّ مَاءٍ عَلَى وَجْهِ الْأَرْضِ مَاءُ بَوَادِي بِرَهَوْتَ بِقُبَّةٍ بِحَضْرَمَوْتٍ. Then he said, and the worst of all waters is the water in something called, it's called Ma' Bawadi. And then he mentioned where it's from. It's in a place called Barhout, and it's in a Qubba in Hadramaut. Hadramaut is a district of Yemen. So you have Yemen, and the eastern side of Yemen that borders Oman is called Hadramaut. It's called the Hadramaut Valley. It's known for being an amazing place with pious people, by the way. But the Prophet, he mentions that there's a well there. He mentions about a well there, and the Prophet only speaks from Allah. He says there's a well there in Hadramaut that's the worst of all water, and it's in a place called Barhout in Hadramaut. And he explains, he goes كرجل الجراد من الهوامي تصبح تتدفق وتمسي لا بلال لها. He goes that it starts off with having some water and it ends off by being dry and without water. And he goes, it's as if it's filled with locusts. And I was reading the meaning of the hadith, I didn't get it. I was reading the meaning of the hadith, why would it be bad or something? And they say that it could be bad because there's a lot of insects and bugs that completely fill the water, so it's not healthy water and it's not good water. So the Prophet calls it bad water. And there's another comment here on the hadith saying that there's shayateen or something there, so it's not good water. But the greatest of all water is ZamZam, and the worst of all water is Bawadi. Ma'u Bawadi, which is in Hadramaut. I never heard of it until today. So we learn something new every day. We ask Allah to grant ZamZam. So now, moving on to the Quranic ayahs, because now we have an understanding in a backdrop. Now we have an understanding of the story in order, because sometimes the Quran comes, like we said, in an indirect, or it points to, but doesn't mention it like this. So we understand that Ibrahim alayhi salam is amazing. His story is interesting. In his story, there's many different phases in his story. Like we said, we have Babel and Iraq, and then we have Palestine, and then we have Mecca. And we started off talking about Mecca today, by talking about ZamZam, and next week we'll finish off by talking about the building of the Kaaba, and we'll talk about that, which is the ayahs in Surah Al-Baqarah. But now we turn our attention to Surah Ibrahim. In the Surah of Ibrahim alayhi salam, the last 2 pages of the Surah, in the last 2 pages of the Surah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He mentions this excerpt, which is dua of Ibrahim alayhi salam to Allah. So Allah, He says, before the dua, I'm going to give one ayah before the dua and then get into the dua so we get some context. He goes, وَآتَاكُم مِّن كُلِّ مَا سَأَلْتُمُوهُ وَإِن تَعُدُّوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ لَا تُحْصُوهَا إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَظَلُومٌ كَفَّارٌ. Allah, He mentions before this ayah like 4 ayahs pertaining to beautiful things that Allah has. And He sent down water from the sky, this, that, right? Beautiful natural things. Then He goes, وَآتَاكُم مِّن كُلِّ مَا سَأَلْتُمُوهُ. Then Allah, He says, and Allah has given you all from everything that you have asked of Him. Allah, He grants you whatever you ask from Him. وَإِن تَعُدُّوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ لَا تُحْصُوهَا إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَظَلُومٌ كَفَّارٌ. Then Allah, He goes and He says, and if you were to try to enumerate or to count the blessing of Allah, you would not be able to comprehend that blessing. إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَظَلُومٌ كَفَّارٌ. Indeed, the human being is often ungrateful. Indeed, the human is often ungrateful. Alright? Allah, He says, and وَآتَاكُم مِّن كُلِّ مَا سَأَلْتُمُوهُ. Allah, He granted you from whatever you ask of Him. And then He goes, and if you were to count the blessing of Allah, He doesn't say وَإِن تُعُدُّوا نِعَمِ اللَّهِ or أَنْعُمِ اللَّهِ. He doesn't see the plural. He says ni'mah. وَإِن تُعُدُّوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ. And if you try to enumerate the blessing of Allah. So when you read the tafsir of this ayah, they say that because with one single blessing falls or comes down it thousands of ni'am. So don't even count your blessings. Don't count your blessings. Count one blessing, brother. Try to count one blessing. Try to enumerate. Try to comprehend. Try to understand one blessing of Allah. You can't. Wallahi, you can't. La tuhsuha. You won't be able to. What's one blessing of Allah? Guidance. Guidance. Under guidance comes salah. Under guidance comes siyam. Under guidance comes zakah. Under guidance comes Quran. Under guidance comes the masjid. Under guidance comes wudu. It's amazing. Islam is amazing. It's amazing. Happiness, tranquility, sakina. Everything comes with Islam and guidance. Everything. You count the blessing of your eyesight. What comes out of your eyesight? Reading a book, reading the Quran, watching a movie. There's so many things come out of it. The blessing of walking, the blessing of sleep, the blessing of anything. وَإِن تَعُدُّوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ. If you take one blessing and you try to enumerate one blessing, you can't enumerate it. You cannot comprehend it. You cannot. إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَظَلُومٌ كَفَّارٌ. Indeed, the human being is often ungrateful. Then these ayahs begin with Ibrahim making dua to Allah. وإذ قال إبراهيم رب اجعل هذا البلد آمنا وجنبني وبني أن نعبد الأصنام رب إنهن أضللن كثيرا من الناس فمن تبعني فإنه مني ومن عصاني فإنك غفور رحيم. Ibrahim, he says, وإذ قال إبراهيم رب اجعل هذا البلد آمنا وجنبني وبني أن نعبد الأصنام. He goes and he calls out to Allah and he says, oh Allah, make this land, Becca, that he just left or he's walking away from, a sanctuary. Make it safe. Make it a balad amin. So Allah, He made it muharram. He made it a haram. So Allah answered that dua. And He goes, وَجَنُبَنِي وَبَنِيَ أَن نَعْبُدُ الْأَصْنَامِ. And He goes, and protect me. He goes, and protect me. Junubani, protect me and my offspring from worshipping idols. They say that from dua. When you make dua for yourself and your parents and your offspring. You say, Ya Allah, protect me and my offspring. You don't just make dua like that selfish, oh, for me. No, make dua for everyone, bro. Make dua for the whole ummah. You lose nothing. So He goes in, and protect me and my offspring from shirk, from worshipping idols. Then He goes to explain that. He goes, Rabbi innahunna adlalna kathiran min an-nasi. He goes, these idols, they made so many people fall astray. They made so many people go astray. فَمَنْ تَبِعَنِي فَإِنَّهُ مِنِّي وَمَنْ عَصَانِي فَإِنَّكَ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. So then Ibrahim alayhi salam, he goes, after mentioning polytheism, Ishraq billah. The worst thing you could do is worshipping an idol instead of Allah. After mentioning this, he says something subtle. He says, oh Allah, please protect me and my offspring from worshipping idols. And he goes, oh Allah, they have made many people fall astray. And whomsoever follows me, for indeed he's from me. Ibrahim, he says, فَمَنْ تَبِعَنِي فَإِنَّهُ مِنِّي. He goes, whomsoever followed me or my way, he's Hanif like me. He's a mukhlis like me. He's a muwahid like me. So he's from me. وَمَنْ عَصَانِي فَإِنَّكَ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. And whomsoever does not believe in me and what I come with, oh Allah, you're all merciful. What does that mean? It's a subtle way of what? It's not saying all out, Ya Allah, have mercy on a polytheist. That's not what he's saying. He's not saying have mercy on those who commit shirk. But he's basically saying, Allah, you're very merciful. Whomsoever follows me is from me, Allah. Basically, you're not going to punish someone that is a muwahid. And whomsoever doesn't follow me and he goes against me, and he goes against Allah, فَإِنَّكَ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. And dear Allah, you're all merciful. Allahu Akbar, like he's reminding Allah, like you're all merciful. And then in regards to this ayah, it said that أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم تلا قول الله تعالى. The Prophet Muhammad صلى الله عليه وسلم, he read this ayah one time. ربي إنهن أضللن كثيرا من الناس فمن تبعني فإنه مني ومن عصاني فإنك غفور رحيم. The Prophet, he read this ayah one time in front of his companions, and then after that he immediately recited another ayah. So he added another ayah next to this, not in the order, from another surah called Surah Al-Ma'idah. And the last page of Surah Al-Ma'idah, at the end of the story of Isa alayhi salam with the Hawariyin, with his disciples, what does Isa say at the end of that surah? He goes, إن تعذبهم فإنهم عبادك وإن تغفر لهم فإنك أنت العزيز الحكيم. Isa alayhi salam, after he talks about those who worshipped him and his mom in a wrong way, polytheists, haram, he goes, إن تعذبهم فإنهم عبادك. He goes, oh Allah, if you were to punish them, then they're your slaves. What does that mean? Ya Allah, if you were to punish them, then Ya Allah, you could do whatever you want with whatever you want. Ya Allah, they're your slaves. You want to punish them, you can punish them. If you want to forgive them, you can forgive them. Then he goes, وإن تغفر لهم فإنك غفور رحيم فإنك أنت العزيز الحكيم. And he goes, but Allah, if you pardon them and show mercy unto them, you're all wise and gentle. So the Prophet, he read this because they are the same meaning. Because Ibrahim, he says, whomsoever follows me is a muwahid, and whomsoever doesn't follow me, Allah, you're all merciful. Isa alayhi salam, he says the same exact thing. He says, Ya Allah, they are your servants, and you could do whatever you want to them, but I know Allah, you're all wise. وَرَفَعَ يَدَيْهِ. The Prophet, so he read these two ayahs, then he raised his hands and he made dua. He said, Allahumma ummati, Allahumma ummati, Allahumma ummati, wa baka. So the Prophet, he read these two ayahs and he saw the outcome of Ibrahim and the people that didn't believe in him. And he saw the outcome of Isa and those who didn't believe in him, and it hurt the Prophet because he wants his people to believe in him. He doesn't want his people to go to Jahannam. He loves his people. He loves Quraysh, they're his people. So he started to cry and he made dua for his ummah. فَقَالَ اللَّهُ يَا جِبْرِيلُ اذْهَبْ إِلَى مُحَمَّدٍ. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is so beautiful. He calls out to Jibreel alayhi salam and he says, go to Muhammad. He goes, go to Muhammad. وَاسْأَلْهُ مَا يُبْكِيكَ. And go ask Muhammad why he's crying. فأتاه جبريل عليه السلام فسأله فأخبره رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ما قال فقال الله اذهب إلى محمد فقل له إنا سنرديك في أمتك ولا نسوءك. So Allah, he calls out to Jibreel, he goes, go to Muhammad, ask him why he's crying. So he tells him why he said he read these two ayahs and he made dua for his ummah. He said, go to Muhammad, go back to Muhammad and tell him, سَنُرْدِيكَ فِي أُمَّتِكَ. We're going to make you very pleased and happy with your ummah. And don't worry, we're going to make you pleased with your ummah and we're not going to hurt you. وَلَا نُسُوءُكَ. We're not going to hurt you in your ummah. And we look at the conclusion of the Prophet Muhammad's nation. It's one of the greatest nations and it's a large ummah. Alhamdulillah, Allah, he answered that dua. So this is just something beautiful because Islam is amazing and Allah is all just. And we don't want to always say Jahannam, Jahannam to everyone. No, Allah is all wise. He could do whatever he wants to his slaves, all right? Then the crux of the ayahs come about the story of ZamZam. After these two beautiful ayahs of him making dua for him and his offspring, correct? He says, رَبَّنَا إِنِّي أَسْكَنْتُ مِنْ ذُرِّيَّتِي بِوَادٍ غَيْرَ ذِي زَرْعٍ عِنْدَ بَيْتِكَ الْمُحَرَّمِ رَبَّنَا لِيُقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ فَاجْعَلْ أَفْئِدَةً مِنَ النَّاسِ تَهْوِي إِلَيْهِمْ وَارْزُقْهُمْ مِنَ الثَّمَرَاتِ لَعَلَّهُمْ يَشْكُرُونَ. Then Ibrahim alayhi salam, he says, Oh Allah, رَبَّنَا إِنِّي أَسْكَنْتُ مِنْ ذُرِّيَّتِي بِوَادٍ غَيْرَ ذِي زَرْعٍ عِنْدَ بَيْتِكَ الْمُحَرَّمِ. They say that these ayahs or this dua was recited when he was walking away from Hajar. She called out to him 3 times, like we said. He turned around and he said, yes, I'm going because Allah commanded me. They said then when you see someone from a distance, you begin not to see him, right? Then you can no longer see him. They say once you are no longer able to see Ibrahim from a distance, he recited these verses to Allah to protect his wife and his offspring. He was scared for him. He goes, رَبَّنَا إِنِّي أَسْكَنْتُ مِن ذُرِّيَّتِي بِوَادٍ. Ya Allah, I left my offspring, Ismail and my wife, in this valley, بِوَادٍ غَيْرَ ذِي زَرْعٍ عِنْدَ بَيْتِكَ الْمُحَرَّمِ. I left my offspring and my wife in this valley, this barren valley, that has no vegetation and no water in it. And I'm really worried. By your house, by your famous house, O Allah. عِنْدَ بَيْتِكَ الْمُحَرَّمِ. And then he goes, رَبَّنَا لِيُقِيمُ الصَّلَاةِ. So Allah, that they may establish the prayer. So فَجْعَلْ أَفْئِدَةً مِّنَ النَّاسِ تَهْوِي إِلَيْهِمْ. So Ya Allah, make the hearts of the people be connected and love this house in this area. وَارْزُقُهُم مِّنَ الثَّمَرَاتِ لَعَلَّهُمْ يَشْكُرُونَ. And oh Allah, grant them a provision from the provisions that you could grant them, so that they could be thankful, so that they can show gratitude and shukr. And like we said, this comes 4 ayahs after the ayah of no matter what you do, you can't enumerate the blessing of Allah. So Ibrahim alayhi salam, he makes dua, and they say in the tafsir that once he's finished making this dua, once he was done making this dua, Jibreel alayhi salam came down and he hit the floor, and ZamZam was formed, and ZamZam came out due to the dua. So the dua was answered immediately. The dua was from a prophet and a messenger, and it went to Jibreel and it came down and it hit the floor of Ismail alayhi salam's feet. He's also a prophet and messenger. And he says, they say, what is this valley? This is the valley of Mecca or the valley of Al-Marwa, because that's where they were, which is all one area. It's all one desert area. And then he made dua so that they may establish the prayer, and that happened because the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ came out in the offspring of Ibrahim. That's his offspring. He made dua for his offspring so they can establish the prayer. Then the Prophet Muhammad came, and now we all pray with the ummah of salah. The Prophet Muhammad's ummah is the ummah of salah. And then he said, فَجْعَلْ أَفْئِدَةً مِّنَ النَّاسِ تَهْوِي إِلَيْهِ. تهوي إليهم. He goes, and let people's love for this land be strong. But I was reading something in the tafsir that was really interesting that I want to mention. He said فَجْعَلْ أَفْئِدَةً مِّنَ النَّاسِ. He doesn't say فَجْعَلْ أَفْئِدَةَ النَّاسِ. He doesn't say let all the people's hearts be connected. He doesn't say let all the people's hearts be connected. They said if Ibrahim alayhi salam made in his dua, let all the people's hearts be connected, then it would be overcrowded with all non-Muslims as well. Not only Muslims, but Jews and Christians, and everyone would love Mecca. But he said, فَجْعَلْ أَفْئِدَةً مِّنَ النَّاسِ تَهْوِي إِلَيْهِ. He goes, oh Allah, make some of the hearts of people, some. And they say, these some today are the Muslims. And that's why Mecca is an answer. Mecca is an answer to the dua of Ibrahim for what? For people to love and long for Mecca. Because as a Muslim, a sign of Iman is to love Mecca, because in Mecca you find something called the Kaaba. And every Muslim loves the Kaaba, the house of Allah that Ibrahim alayhi salam built with Ismail. So Allah placed that love in the heart of the Iman of a mu'min. And he did something else. He entered the dua of Ibrahim alayhi salam. The next dua was what? After, may Allah grant them establishing of the prayer. He goes, وَرْزُقُهُم مِّنَ الثَّمَرَاتِ لَعَلَّهُمْ يَشْكُرُونَ. And grant them provisions so that they could be thankful. They say Mecca has everything you want in it. And Mecca has all types of fruits in it. When you go to Mecca, you find all the greatest types of fruits in it. And you find ZamZam in it. So Allah, he entered that dua immediately. Then he goes, رَبَّنَا إِنَّكَ تَعْلَمُ مَا نُخْفِي وَمَا نُعْلِنُ. So these next 4 ayahs, these are like the most beautiful 4 ayahs in the Quran. Wallahi, they're beautiful dua from the dua of Ibrahim that took place right now when he was walking away from his wife. So he's hurting and his wife is hurting. His wife has reliance upon Allah and he has reliance upon Allah, but he also takes the means and he's making dua to Allah. He asks Allah for this first thing that we just mentioned in detail, and Allah, he granted him all of that. He protected his offspring. He brought Muhammad ﷺ out of his offspring from Ismail. He made him establishing salah. He granted them ZamZam. He granted them fruits. He granted the haram of Mecca al-Haram. And then he goes, رَبَّنَا إِنَّكَ تَعْلَمُ مَا نُخْفِي وَمَا نُعْلِنُ. And then he says, وَمَا يَخْفَى عَلَى اللَّهِ مِنْ شَيْءٍ فِي الْأَرْضِ وَلَا فِي السَّمَاءِ. This dua is so beautiful, because in dua means you talk to Allah. You don't always have to ask for something. Sometimes in dua you could just talk to Allah. And here we have an example of that. It's so beautiful. He says, رَبَّنَا إِنَّكَ تَعْلَمُ مَا نُخْفِي وَمَا نُعْلِنُ. He goes, oh Allah, you know everything that we show, everything that we come out with, and everything that we conceal. This is so beautiful. He's just doing something called idlal. He's showing Allah that he's weak. He goes, رَبَّنَا إِنَّكَ تَعْلَمُ مَا نُخْفِي وَمَا نُعْلِنُ. Ya Allah, you know everything that we come out with and everything that we conceal and we hide. وَمَا يَخْفَى عَلَى اللَّهِ مِنْ شَيْءٍ فِي الْأَرْضِ وَلَا فِي السَّمَاءِ. And nothing could be hidden from Allah. And there's nothing that Allah is unaware of. فِي الْأَرْضِ وَلَا فِي السَّمَاءِ. On earth and in the world, and in the sama, in the heavens. There is nothing that Allah is unaware of. Oh Allah, إِنَّكَ تَعْلَمُ مَا نُخْفِي وَمَا نُعْلِنُ. Say this to Allah. Ya Allah, you know everything. Ya Allah, you know what I hide and what I don't hide. Ya Allah, you know what I come out with and what I show and what I don't show. It's beautiful. Be humble to Allah. And then he goes after this, after being humble to Allah in this dua, he says, الحمد لله الذي وهب لي على الكبر إسماعيل وإسحاق إن ربي لسميع دعاء. Then he praises Allah in this next dua. Like we said, dua doesn't always have to be asking for something. He asked for something, he did. He asked for something. And we said when you ask for something in dua, there's also etiquette. And when you ask for something, also ask for your offspring and ask for those Muslims around you, ask for your friends. Like include people in your dua. So it's not always about you. Because like, sometimes it comes off as egotistical. Of course you can make dua for yourself, no problem. But there's adab of dua. There's nice things to do in dua. Make dua for your offspring and your parents. And then after you ask for whatever you want, like do something else in dua called idlal, which is an example here, putting yourself down in front of Allah. Allah, you know everything. Allah, I'm weak and you're strong. Allah, I'm poor and you're rich. And then do something else called praising Allah. You praise Allah in dua as well. He goes, Alhamdulillah alladhi wahaba li ala al-kibri Ismail wa Ishaq inna rabbi lasami' ad-du'a. He goes, Alhamdulillah, all praise is due to Allah alladhi wahaba li ala al-kibr. Look how he talks. He goes, the one who has gifted me, wahaba li. Wahaba li is to be gift. The one who has gifted me at an old age, Ibrahim and Ishaq. He goes, all praise is due to Allah, the King of Kings, the one who has granted me at old age, Ismail and Ishaq. He granted him Ismail. They say he was 100 years old when he had Ismail. And he granted him Ishaq 13 years after Ismail. He goes, thank you Allah. All praise is due to you for granting me children at an old age. And he goes, Inna Rabbi lasami' ad-du'a. Indeed. He goes, indeed. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala lasami' ad-du'a is all hearing of dua. He doesn't say Inna Rabbi sami' ad-du'a. He doesn't say Inna Rabbi sami' ad-du'a. Guys, I want to show you something linguistically. In Arabic language, to hear something, that's sami'. You're a sami'. The one who hears is a sami'. The one who is sami' is the one who hears everything ever. Sami' is something called sighat mubalagha. It's an emphasized verb tense in Arabic. So you have someone called sami', he hears, he can hear. Then you have someone sami', you say, oh, he's sami', and he hears everything, bro. He has light sleep. You walk by him, you breathe by him, he wakes up, he's sami'. He says, Inna Rabbi lasami' ad-du'a. He adds a third thing to it. So he doesn't just say sami', he says lasami'. The lam in Arabic is something called harf tawqid. The lam in Arabic language is something called an emphasized, I don't know how to call it, thing that you add. In grammar, I don't know what it's called. It's not a word. It's I don't know. No, not huh? No, I forgot the word of it in English. Anyway, he adds the lam. La sami'a means it's a harf tawqid. I forgot the word in English. It's something to emphasize. So sami' is very emphasized, and this also emphasizes. He goes, Inna Rabbi la sami' ad-du'a. He basically said that indeed, he says indeed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he hears everything in the world. In Ibrahim alayhi salam, he's telling us as Muslims who follow him and follow the Prophet and read the Quran, Wallahi, Allah, he hears you. Wallahi, Allah, he hears everything you say to him. Everything is heard by Allah. Make dua and 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 sleep and wake up and make dua and drive to work and make dua. Allah, he hears everything. How does Allah hear everything? When Allah, he describes himself in the Quran, he says, وَيَعْلَمُ مَا فِي الْبَرِّ وَالْبَحْرِ وَمَا تَسْقَطُ مِنْ وَرَقَةٍ إِلَّا يَعْلَمُهَا وَلَا حَبَّةٍ فِي ظُلُمَاتِ الْأَرْضِ وَلَا رَطَبٍ وَلَا يَابِسٍ إِلَّا فِي كِتَابٍ مُبِينٍ. Allah, he says in Surah Al-An'am, وَيَعْلَمُ مَا فِي الْبَرِّ وَالْبَحْرِ. And Allah, he knows everything. فِي الْبَرِّ وَالْبَحْرِ. Bar is on land and in the ocean. وَمَا تَسْقَطُ مِنْ وَرَقَةٍ إِلَّا يَعْلَمُهَا. And there's not a single leaf on the face of the planet Earth that falls except Allah is aware of when and how it fell. Look up the Amazon rainforest on Google. It has 1 million trees and 1 million zillion leaves. Allah knows every leaf and when it fell and how it fell. Allah knows everything. وَلَا حَبَّةٍ فِي ظُلُمَاتِ الْأَرْضِ وَلَا رَطَبٍ إِلَّا فِي كِتَابٍ مُبِينٍ. And there's not a single pebble on earth or anything moist except it's in a book by Allah. It's in a book by Allah. Yani Allah is all aware of everything. So indeed Allah, he hears your dua. If Allah knows all these little insects and all these little leaves, this is just showing you that Allah, he hears and he knows everything. In the next ayah, رَبِّ اجْعَلْ لِي مُقِيمَ الصَّلَاةِ وَمِنْ ذُرِّيَّتِ رَبَّنَا وَتَقَبَّلْ دُعَاء. Again, he makes dua. He ends off now his long dua, his 5 ayahs of dua, with making dua again for salah. He says, رَبِّ اجْعَلْ لِي مُقِيمَ الصَّلَاةِ. Again, he goes, Ya Allah, make me of those who establish the prayer, because salah is the most important thing in the world. If you have salah, you have Allah. If you have salah, you have happiness. If you have salah, you have tranquility. If you have salah, you have protection. If you have salah, you have Allah and you're happy and you're victorious. Everything in the world is salah. So he makes dua again for salah, because he started off with salah. لِيُقِيمُ الصَّلَاةِ. He said so they can establish the prayer. Now he goes again, رَبِّ اجْعَلْنِي مُقِيمَ الصَّلَاةِ وَمِنْ ذُرِّيَّتِي. Ya Allah, make me of those who establish the prayer, and again in my offspring. Yeah? رَبَّنَا وَتَقَبَّلْ دُعَاء. Oh Allah, accept our dua. Oh Allah, accept our dua. So he ends off these dua by making dua again for salah, and to make him of those who establish salah, because of what salah means. and for وَذُرِّيَّتِي, and my offspring. Who was in the offspring of Sayyidina Ibrahim? Like we mentioned, Sayyidina Muhammad alayhi salam, salawatullahi ta'ala alayhi, the greatest man to ever walk the face of the earth, is from the progeny of Ismail alayhi salam. And he came with salah, and he established salah, of course, and we all established salah. And he goes, Rabbana taqabbal du'a. He goes, oh Allah, please accept our dua. Then he says, Rabbana ghfir li wa li walidayya wa lil mu'minina yawma yaqumul hisab. Oh Allah, have mercy on me, and have mercy on my parents, and have mercy on all the mu'mins. Wa lil mu'minina yawma yaqumul hisab. The day that the accountability will be taken. What is that day? Yawma yaqumul hisab. The day that the accountability will be taken on Yawm al-Qiyamah. He makes dua for Yawm al-Qiyamah. Sayyidina Ibrahim makes dua for Yawm al-Qiyamah. Something interesting, because this concept of Yawm al-Qiyamah is not foreign to the prophets and messengers before Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam came with the Quran. The Quran talks about Yawm al-Qiyamah, and he taught us about Yawm al-Qiyamah. But all the prophets and messengers came with Islam, and Islam is certain beliefs, like the Day of Judgment and stuff. So he makes dua. He says, Rabbana ghfir li wa li walidayya. Oh Allah, have mercy on me and my parents. Wa lil mu'minin, and all the believers. Yawma yaqumul hisab, the day that accountability will rise. Yani the Day of Judgment, when everyone is going to be held accountable. So in the story of Hajar and Ismail, when the ZamZam is found, what happens when water is found in a barren land? It attracts something called life and people, right? So the people went and they gathered around the well, and they started to make civilization around the well, which is why Mecca is a city today, because of the water of ZamZam. So there were some tribes, nomadic tribes in the area, and like we said, if a nomadic tribe finds something called water, he's going to go and stick around the water, because they can drink and live, because water is life. So there was a tribe called Jurhum. They were an Arab tribe called Jurhum. They were Arab. Ibrahim alayhi salam was Suryani. He was Aramaic from Babel. His second wife bore him Ismail. Ismail was raised by Jurhum, and he married into Jurhum. You guys understand what I'm saying? So Ishaq, and then Yaqub, and then Yusuf, and all these prophets, they were the prophets of Bani Israel. Hebrew prophets, right, from Bani Israel, the offspring of Ishaq, the offspring of Yaqub and Yusuf and all of them, right, the Asbat. Then we have on the other side Hajar, her son is Ismail. We have something called Arab. We have something called Arab Musta'riba. Arab that were made Arab, but were not originally Arab. They are the descendants of Ismail alayhi salam. When we refer to Arabs, when we categorize Arabs, there's one category of Arabs called Arab Musta'riba. Arab that became Arab. They're called Arab that became Arab because Ismail alayhi salam became Arab because he was raised by Jurhum. He was raised by Jurhum. They were Arabs living in Mecca. They lived by the well of ZamZam, and he was raised by them, and he married into them, and he had offspring from them, and then his progeny was Arab because they were Arab. And then from his progeny came Nabi al-Adnani. From his progeny came Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who is an Arab, and he's the greatest of all Arabs and the greatest man to walk the face of the earth. Inshallah, we continue next week at the same time. We'll continue next week the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam. We'll reach the third part of the story that we're going to talk about, which is the story of the building of the Kaaba and the Hajj. And it's going to come at a perfect timing, because it will come about 3 days before Eid al-Adha. As we said today, Saudi Arabia has announced that they saw the Hilal of the Hijjah, and that these are the 10 days of the Hijjah starting tomorrow, alhamdulillah. And Eid al-Adha will be on the 16th of the 6th month, June, 16th of June. So 15th of June is Yom Arafah, which is a Saturday. So we'll remind all of us to fast on Yom Arafah. And ICPC will actually be having a program. ICPC is going to be having a program on the day before Eid. They have an Eid Bazaar, and they'll have food there that you could buy as well. So we'll be there for Maghrib, inshallah, on the day of Arafah. And Yom al-Ahad is Eid, and they're still discussing where exactly they're going to have the Eid prayer. You'll hear about it soon, inshallah. So in these next 10 days of the Hijjah, increase your ibadah. It's blessed days. It's the season of Hajj. It's finally upon us, and that's why we're talking about Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam to bring light to his legacy. He's a great prophet and messenger, and it's a sign from Iman. It's a sign of Iman to love the prophets and messengers. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us strong Iman and istiqamah and steadfastness and taqwa and God consciousness. We ask Allah to make us steadfast and sincere. We ask Allah to grant us the ability to go make Hajj and an accepted Hajj. We ask Allah to grant us a closeness to Sayyidina Ibrahim and the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us of those who establish the prayer. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us of those who establish the prayer. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam taslima kathira. Inshallah, we're going to make the adhan for Isha, and we're going to pray Isha in 5 minutes, inshallah.